Today's gospel, it takes us fishing once again on the Sea of Galilee. And it reminds me of whenever I was a kid and I was fishing on the Arroyo. And of course, you know that I could not bait my hook, and I still can't. And you know that I couldn't take the fish off the hook once I caught it. I still can't. I was a codependent fisherman. And probably not that much fun. But all I ever caught was catfish. That's the only thing I ever pulled out of the water. And and I was okay with that. Because when I was a kid, I used to love that they came out of the water with their own little bitty mustache already on. I loved that when I was a kid. And when you think about a catfish, although it's just a few inches long, it has more than 250,000 taste buds all over its body. The mouth and the gills, they are packed with taste buds, and there are sensory organs, covering the outside of the body as well. The whiskers, the fins, the back, the mustache, the sides, and even the tail have them. So if you were like a catfish, you could eat stuff by sitting on it. They're like swimming tongues. That's how they taste. And so, a catfish, it forages through the muck at the bottom of the water. And his entire body as he swims, is designed to sense the presence of that sustenance that he needs just by rubbing up against it. That's how he knows. And the same can be true for us in a way. As we forge through our life, we are equipped with a comprehensive set of physical, emotional, and spiritual sensory organs that are capable of sensing God's presence in our lives. And that is if we are looking for it and if we recognize it. This year, one of my friends, closer to Halloween, she has this app that she had on her phone, and it was supposed to tell you when ghosts were near. And it has like a little radar screen and little blips, and it tells you how close the ghosts are to you, and it's called Ghost Finder. But what if, instead of Ghost Finder, they made an app called the Holy Ghost Finder? That would be awesome. That way you could download it and you could check to see when Christ is near anytime you want. But the truth is that we just don't know sometimes. We get caught up with the situations that we are in, that we forget to be on the lookout for his presence in our life. We get swamped at work. We get bogged down with those details of our personal lives. And with our head down, we just continue to wade through that muck of life. It's like, have you ever been in that situation where, you're trying to accomplish something so badly. You're working so hard trying to make it through, trying to come out on top, working so hard to have something to show for your efforts. And all the while, as you keep trying, no avail. It just doesn't happen. And you get frustrated. You get tired. You get weary because you've been working so hard and that hopelessness is sneaking up on you. And you want to throw your hands up and say, forget it. Forget it, because failure seems to be the victor anyway. And so it sneaks in. It's in those moments that, as we think about them now, that sure, we want Christ to be there to help us with his awesome power, with that comforting presence. Gosh, we sure could use some holy ease as we toil. And so we'd like Christ to be there, but do we even recognize him whenever he is? The truth is that we can be so involved, that we can be so invested in what we are trying to accomplish, that our catfish senses just switch off. Jesus could be right next to us with a foghorn, and we could be oblivious sometimes. We are too concerned with our own labor, our own weariness. We're too concerned with our own skills, our own talents, caught up in the struggles, that we can miss the very thing that helps get us through, the one who can lead us to completion. Do we recognize? That's the same question that we ask of the disciples in today's gospel. You see, this was a spectacular time, because the resurrection has already occurred. And a lot of people think on Easter that he rose from the grave and then he went straight to heaven. But that's not the case. Jesus knew after the resurrection that the disciples were still a little shaky. He knew that they needed a little bit more instruction, a confidence of spirit. And so after the resurrection, Jesus appears here and there for 40 days before he ascends to heaven. And so this is the period that we are in this story, in our lectionary. And And in a way, this 40 days that the disciples were in must have been the most exciting, yet frustrating time. While they rejoiced in knowing that Christ was, yes, that he was still alive, they no longer saw him every day. And that was hard for them. And they never knew when Jesus would appear either. He would just suddenly show up, I'm here. And so you would think that they would just constantly always be on the lookout, always watching out for him. But not always. Today you find the disciples, and they're standing, on the shore at the Sea of Galilee. And it's the place where it all began. Yet here we are again as we near the end. And it's a very special time. Even the names and the numbers of the disciples tell us so. Nathaniel is there. Thomas is there. Brothers John and James, and of course Peter and 2 other unnamed disciples. That's 7 of them. And 7 is a very important and prophetic number in Scripture. It is the number of completion. So standing on the sea at night, Peter looks at the rest of them and he goes, well, I'm going fishing. Now, I don't know if he was hungry. I don't know if he was tired of waiting or just doing what he knew best. But either way, he says, I'm going fishing. And so the other disciples say, well, all right, we'll go with you. And so they all go. And they fish all night long, all night. And yet the word of the Lord says that they caught nothing. Nothing. Not even one fish, not even a catfish. It must have been very discouraging. They were up all night. They were tired. No fish. They were hungry. And they were frustrated by all the things that are missing in their life. And we can relate to that moment, when all of our efforts, all of our sweat, our blood, our tears, all of our planning, all that we can do is met with just disappointing results. We get it. And whether it's fishing or otherwise, we know what it feels like to come up empty-handed, especially when you've just put so much time in, when you've had such high hopes and expectations. Each time, you're casting harder and harder, and you're trying more fervently, grasping at something, anything, just to be a hint of progress. But my gosh, the less that it yields, the more frustration builds. And as the disciples, they're there, and as their sweat drips from their brows into the waters, they hear a voice, hey, friend, y'all catching any fish? And it's a man standing on the shore. Now, if you've ever been fishing and caught nothing, that is not the question you want to hear. It's what ruffles you most, especially when you get home. So the disciples, they sigh and they look up from their nets and they answer the man, no, we haven't. And so the man says, well, why don't you cast your net on the right side of the boat and then you'll find some. Now, it goes without saying that they've already tried that side. It's fishing 101. If there ain't none on that side, you reckon you try the other. And Lord knows, in those frustrating moments, the last thing you want to hear is some wise guy telling you how to do it. No one wants to hear that. The disciples are professional fishermen. They need no tips. But heck, it's morning now, and they hadn't caught a thing, so what do they have to lose? Best case scenario, they'll cast it, catch nothing again, but at least they'll get rid of this dude. And so they cast it, and as they tugged the line, their mouths fell plumb open because there were so many fish in the net that they couldn't even pull it into the boat. You can almost hear their boyish squeals echoing off the water. And so they're all focused on this great haul of fish that they pulled out of the water. It's capturing their full attention. And no one is yet recognizing the power in which these fish were caught. But there is one disciple who puts his catfish senses to work. His mind is sensing, his body is overcome with that feeling that comes when God is near. And it's the beloved disciple who Jesus loved, and it's John. And John begins to think, he's like, hey, this situation is sounding real familiar. Wait a minute, let me think. It's coming to me. Oh yeah, this happened before when we were first called by Jesus. Remember, he came to us and he told us to go out after his sermon and catch some fish, and we did, and there were so many. Oh my gosh, Peter, it is the Lord. And I love how our experiences of God in the past can be reminders and indicators of God in our life now. So he says, Peter, he's the Lord. And before he could even finish that sentence, Peter was wrestling his arm into that sleeve, and he was putting on his clothes, and he jumped into the water. While the others still focused on that great haul of fish, Peter is splashing around like a madman in full clothes, breaststroking to the shore. Like a madman. He could not get there fast enough. And forget the fish. My gosh, Christ is here. And why the heck did he put his clothes on? Well, back in the day, the word actually says that they fished in their undies, in their undergarments, because the clothes were too heavy in the water, and so they would take them off. People speculate different reasons about why he put his clothes on. But I think Peter was just so overwhelmed with emotion, with excitement, with eagerness, that he just didn't know what he was doing. It's like winning the lottery. You don't know what you're doing. You're just jumping around, flapping your arms. You don't know. You're not thinking. But Peter reminds us that the important thing is not the blessings that you receive, but the reason why you receive them. You see, that's Peter. He's always spirited. He speaks too quickly. He always fumbles to the front. And he's big in failing. But he is also very big in action. And why wouldn't he want to get there fast? I mean, he denied Jesus 3 times when he needed him most. And although Christ did not hold that against him, but even so, I bet every night since, guilt and regret and remorse have ruled his thoughts every night. In fact, that might be the very reason why he went to fish at night in the first place, to escape. But now here is his chance to prove his loyalty, to his love, his commitment, and he wasn't going to blow it this time. Peter breaststrokes in full clothes about 100 yards to the shore, and the disciples, they still follow in the boat, towing the fish. So the question is, what would have happened if they refused the help of a masked stranger? What would have happened had they not recognized Jesus on the shore? Would they have continued to be unsuccessful and be empty-handed? Would they have missed that opportunity to be with the Christ they loved so much? And what an opportunity it was. As they land on the shore, they get there and they see a fire burning with coals. And there's fish on it. And there's warm bread next to it. And Jesus, now in clear focus, smiles. And he opens his arms, and with the sunrise of orange reddish hues cascading behind him, he says, "Come and have breakfast with me. Come have breakfast with me." And it's one of those moments in scriptures that you just long to be in. Whenever I was a kid, in the mornings, my grandma would get out her big griddle, and she would make up her homemade batch of pancake batter. And she even made the syrup from scratch. She still does, and it is heavenly. All of the grandkids would line up, to her, and she'd say, "Okay, what shape do you want?" And she'd pour out bears and rainbows, and she'd make smiley faces, much to our delight. And I'd always try to trick her when I got there, and I'd say, "I want an octopus with a hat and a baton and a pipe." Like I would try to throw these intricate things out.
She must have known you were dead.
Yeah. And she would not miss a beat. She would pour out this messy blob, straight-faced, and I would be tickled the whole day. But what I loved most about those mornings was the conversations that I would have with her. With The Price is Right blaring in the background, I'd interrogate her on the ways of the world, which one time very vividly included, "Grandma, what does it mean to have your dog neutered?" I loved those mornings to hear my grandma's wisdom. And I think that pancakes with grandma is just a hint of what waffles with Jesus will be like. To have breakfast with and cooked by Jesus is just about as beautiful as you can get. I made a note here. Too bad there isn't a chapter of recipes in the New Testament. But I love the resurrected Christ. And all the things that he could have done in those 40 days, he took time more than once to break bread with those that he loved, even after the crucifixion. He did not lose, that spirit that called him to wash the disciples' feet. He still comes to us to serve us. He served them with that heart of servitude. That is who our Christ is. That is who our Christ will always be. So today we must recognize that Jesus' omnipotent power far outweighs our human efforts alone. So if you are caught up trying to achieve something in what seems like an uphill struggle, if you keep hitting your head on the wall over and over and over, perhaps it's time to move away from the wall and turn your sights to the Christ who is without a doubt standing nearby. He is on the shore of your life, just waiting for you to recognize him, waiting patiently, just waiting. When you get ready, I'm here, he says. So put on your catfish senses and begin to look around, to feel around. Because the call of today's gospel is that if you want help in your struggles, if you want him to intercede, if you want him to serve you with his beautiful servant heart, you must first recognize him, recognize that he's even there. He is on the shore of your life, waiting for your eyes to open, waiting with an amazing opportunity that you just don't want to miss. Secondly, you must listen to him. He is always trying to speak to you, even if it comes in the form of someone else. Listen. Jesus often stirs the hearts of people around you in order to communicate with you. We are his lips. Listen to him. Do not have a Pharaoh's heart. Unharden it and allow the unimaginable to take hold in your life. And when you do, you have to recognize, his awesome power. And when you do, you'll find, you need to make sure that you have the spirit of Peter. So you don't just recognize him. You need to race towards him. Like crazy. Race towards him. Forget everything else and go. And when you do this, you're going to find, like Peter, that forgiveness flows. You'll find that love conquers, that endeavors prosper. And yes, that breakfast also awaits. And boy, it smells good. Let that scent carry you away from your struggles, from the frustrations of it all. Let that scent say it's time for a break. It's time for you to let go. It's time for you to drop your nets once again and to have some waffles with Jesus. Come on now, it's getting cold. And so I challenge you this week that each time you sit down for breakfast, to return that favor and to recognize him and to instead invite him to breakfast. As I sit here now, let that scent be a reminder of when you get to heaven, the people that you've lost so much. You can think about that one person right now, that special person, and you think about what came out of their oven, what came off their stove. It's that scent, the scent of Christ, and the way that they served it, that will be waiting for us when we get there.